Each side, as a side note, has 16 pieces. 16 with two sides times 2, okay, equals 20, or no, not 20, I sound stupid, my fault. 16 times 2 equals 32 pieces. Knowing that the chessboard has, in nomenclature, has 32 pieces on, if you add up both sides, and 16 pieces on each side. So, this, my friend, is where you put your pawns. Now, knowing that, what is the next step? Well, here's the next step. Now, you have to move in the rooks. Now, where do the rooks go? As you remember, the rook looks like a castle. It's German for a castle. Now, how I remember it is this. The rooks represent different landmarks of a chessboard. And if you break up the board into 4, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 corners that could be, I guess you could say, castles where the king could hide out. Knowing that, the castles are easy, or the rooks in this case. They go into 4 corners of the chessboard. Knowing this, you have now set up the rooks and the pawns. Now, what about the knights? Well, how I remember where the knights go is simple. The knights are protectors in medieval times of the castle. So that's why when you hear in medieval, in Shrek or all these other medieval TV shows, knights protect the princess and stay close to the castle. That's why we're saying that. Because they got to protect the princess in the castle. So knowing that, the knights go right next to the castle, like this. So you can see this is a knight. So now you have set up the pawns, the knights, and the rooks on both sides. Next, we have the push-ups. The push-ups have control in medieval times and in ancient times over the infantry, known as the knights. So, knowing that, here's what happens. The push-ups go right next to the knights because of it. So the push-up, as you can see, is going right next to the knight. Now, I have a funny joke that explains why the king and the queen are so always in the middle parts of the board, as you can see. Middle parts of the board. Well, when ant colonies fight each other, and my name's Antonio. Ant, get it? I did my 4th grade science project on ants. Ants, when they fight, have the queen ant at least, and well, the king ant dies at childbirth, which is kind of sad, but I'm not going to go into that. But as far as that goes, the queen ant goes in the middle of the board to keep her safe from dying. So knowing that, the queen goes in the middle on the same color as what color piece she is. So the white queen goes in the middle white square, and the black queen goes in the black middle square. Whereas the king goes on the opposite color, on the E file, not the D file, the E file. So the king goes on the E file down the middle. Oh, my fault, I did that backwards, my fault. So now, you have successfully set up the chessboard with all 32 of its pieces. You have the king, queen, push-ups, knights, rooks, and pawns set up on both sides. You now have officially become ready to play a game of chess. Knowing this, now you must learn how the pieces move. Just an FYI, this is probably going to be lesson 2, and then I'll break it down to lesson 3. So lesson 2, She's putting this up too, okay. So, first, we have to understand, the game of chess has over 1 as the pawn, 2 the rook, 3 the knight, 4 the bishop, 5 the king, 6 the queen. 6 different pieces, and they all move in very different ways. So knowing that, we have to learn how all of them move before we can go to the next step, which is learning how to actually play the game. So, we're going to start with the easiest piece. The easiest piece to remember how it moves is the king. The king moves 1 square in any direction, as long as it's not blocked, or no, just 1 square in any direction, as long as it's not blocked by its own piece. And what I mean by that is if the king's here on E4, it can move to E5, F5, D5 from E5, and then it can move to D4, F4, E3, D3, and F3. So if the king's here, it can move all around here, but it can't go crazy like here, here, and here, and all that stuff. So 1 square in any direction. That's how you move the king. Next, you have the queen. The queen can move as many squares as it wants in any direction. So knowing that, if it's here, it can go here, it can go here, it can go here, it can go diagonal, it can go side to side, up and down as far as it wants to. Now here's the thing. Unless you're the knight, which we'll get into in a second, you can't skip pieces. And what I mean by that is that let's say your queen's over here. It could go up, if it's going down, downwards, south, horizontally on the D file, that means, in this situation, you can't go to D2, and you can't go to D1, and you can't go to D8. Why is that? Because it's blocked by other pieces. So, if this queen was to go over here, when it was over here, it would have to jump, key word, jump, over this pawn, over here, on D2, which is an illegal move. So know that, so that you don't make illegal moves and get a technical foul in basketball. So, knowing that, how do we move the next piece? Now, for example, the queen's over here. If it can move as far as it wants to, take a guess. What 2 pieces could it take on, obviously, the black side? If you guys, now take a moment and think. What 2 pieces could it take? Back to the question. So, the 2 pieces it could take are G7, which is right over here, from this piece right over here, or, if it wants to, C7. The reason for this is because the queen can move as far as it wants to, vertically, so it's going to take here, and also diagonally, which it could take here. The problem is you can't take your own piece. So knowing that, we're going to have to spare these pawns over here. Because you remember, in chess, you cannot take your own colored piece. Thank you. Next, we have the bishop. Almost dropped it by accident. So, how does the bishop move? Well, the bishop is commonly referred to as either the light square bishop or the dark square bishop, not the black or the red bishop. Why is that? Why is that? Well, the reason behind that is simple. Bishops only move on the same color diagonally. Knowing this, you have every player is bestowed upon them with 1 red bishop, one bishop that's on a dark square, like this one over here on C1, or the one on F1, which looks like, or doesn't look like, which has a light square. Knowing that, how do these move? Well, if you're over here, which pawn, take a guess, which pawn are you allowed to take with the light square bishop on G4? If you answered, as you can follow, the pawn on D7, you're correct. Now remember, you can't take the pawn on E2, which should be over here, because you can't take your own piece. Just a reminder, it's chess, not checkers. And remember, when you take a piece, it doesn't go over the square like in checkers. It goes on the exact same square of a piece that you're taking on the opposite color, like that. So when you take, remember, it goes like this. You take there, you kill this piece. Now what you don't do is take over here, move over, and take this piece like checkers. You don't do that. You don't do that, because that's against the rules. Checkers is chess, not checkers. Remember that. All right, let's go into the final three pieces. We have the knight, the rook, and the pawns. So, next we have the knight. The knight is the hardest piece to get at first, but once you get it, it's very easy. So remember I was going to talk about the knight before? Well, the knight is actually a very strong piece and unique within its own way. Now, if you think about it, I was watching My Little Pony with my little sister once. Funny as it is. And Rainbow Dash can jump very high. As a matter of fact, she can fly. And Applejack jumps pretty high too. Knowing this, horses got hops. Michael Jordan, okay? Michael Jordan. So, knowing that the horse hops over any piece it wants to and takes. That's an important thing to remember. If a horse hops, it's a hymenon. Remember that, it's a hymenon. So, let's say we have these pieces over here. It's just a random setup. It wouldn't happen in the game, but I'm just going to do it anyway, so you guys can see. So, now you said earlier, Antonio, that you can't jump over other pieces, like checkers and take, because that's against the rules. Well, this is the one piece that's allowed to do that because it's a horse, it's a knight. You could jump over other pieces. It's the most convenient piece in chess because it's the only one that can jump. Knowing this, the horse moves in an L. An L that's shaped by 1, 2 in one direction, and then the opposite, 1, 2 vertical or horizontal, and then at the opposite horizontal, you're going to go and take the piece. So look, 1, 2 over 1. And now you have taken a pawn. I'll show you again.